Good evening and welcome to Blue Mondays. Blue Mondays is where we take a look at national, state, and local news through a progressive perspective. On this week's show, we are going to take a first look at the Democratic candidates for President of the United States in 2008. I just got back from Washington, D.C., where I was able to attend the whole entire DNC meeting and was able to hear all of these candidates speak to the group, as well as go and shake most of their hands and get to spend a few minutes with them, just talking with them locally. It was definitely an interesting meeting, and I hope to bring you some of the flavor of that meeting here tonight. But first, as always, your progressive news and commentary this week. President Bush submits his new budget, and oh boy is it a whopper. President Bush has submitted his budget to Congress, and man, I'm telling you, we've got some major problems. Now, mind you, this is printed out on reams and reams and reams and more reams of paper. So we have not been able to get through all of this, and it will probably be some weeks to come before we fully digest all of the information that's in it. But here are some headlines. First, huge, did I say huge? Yes, huge cuts to Medicare. Medicare is going to be receiving the single most, the single largest cut to any line item on the federal budget. Now, there is no way that we can further cut Medicare without cutting services. There is just no way. And the billions of dollars that now are going to be removed from Medicare obviously are going to have to be offset somehow. So the Bush administration has yet to say how they're going to do this. But obviously, they're going to have to cut services. That's the only way we can see that happening. Second, so much for switchgrass. Yeah, you know, the president likes to, as you probably remember from our show 2 weeks ago, the president loves to come up with some great little one-liners for his State of the Union address. However, when it actually comes to reality, not so much. President Bush has cut out all funding, it looks like, for any renewable energy sources. Instead, he would like to continue the huge tax breaks and subsidies for the oil industry. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me when they're making billions upon billions of dollars every day. Every day they're making this money. Unbelievable. While Bush definitely made a lot of headlines, though, saying that he was going to be looking at switchgrass. Well, unbelievable to me that not so much, not in this budget. It's all been cut. And then we see huge increases to military spending, but still no real explanation as to what, where, when, why, and how. Unbelievable. Here's Representative Tim Ryan on Republican spending. Take a look.
And then, on top of all that, they leave the new Democratic majority an absolute budget catastrophe for us to deal with. And over the course of those 14 years, the Republican Congress and the Republican president borrowed more money from foreign interests than all of the previous presidents combined. So now we're going to get lectures from the Republican majority on how to run the budget process. Now we're going to get lectures from the most incompetent, ineffective Congress in the history of this institution, Mr. Speaker. The history of this institution. And this party will not be lectured about veterans' benefits. We will not be lectured to by the Republican minority about how to balance a budget. And we will not be lectured to about investments in this country. You look at this CR and you look what we put in. We're not going to be lectured to by anybody. We've made promises and accomplished more in the last few hundred hours of this Congress than that Republican majority has in the last 14 years. We implemented PAYGO so we will balance the budget. We made some difficult decisions with the CR so we can move forward. And we're not going to be lectured to because we've made promises and we've delivered. Now just look at the first 100 hours, Mr. Speaker. Just the first 100 hours. We cut student loan interest rates in half. Once fully implemented, will save the average person taking out a loan over almost $5,000. We raised the minimum wage. We allowed the Secretary of Health and Human Services to negotiate drug prices on behalf of the Medicare recipients. We repealed the corporate welfare to the energy companies that majority, Republican majority, put in place, and we're taking that money and investing it into alternative energy sources. We're doing things positive for the American people.
Well, you might ask the question, where is Congressman Bustani in all of this? Obviously, this is the news of the headlines. This is one of the biggest news items of the year when the president sends up his budget. So where's Congressman Bustani? Well, in less than, no more than 48 hours after the president submitted his budget to Congress, Congressman Bustani comes out and says, hey, this is great. Love it. Love all of it. Let's do it. Can you believe this? Okay, Congressman Bustani, there was no possible way that he could have made it through this entire piece of legislation, all of the budget outlines and everything. There's no way that he could have done that. And secondly, this is also coming from a man who was on record here in Lafayette when asked if he was going to support the Voting Rights Act renewal. He says he hasn't gotten around to reading it yet. Well, that was written back in the 60s to the congressman. So if he hadn't read that in the 40-plus years that he had available to him, I can't believe that he actually in 2 days made it through the whole entire budget. Unbelievable to me. But he's such a good little soldier. Good soldier. Anyhow, in Congressman Bustani's press release, he supports the president's cuts on Medicare, Medicaid, and other drastic cuts to other programs. It's unbelievable to me. Here's a quote from the congressman. The president's proposal is an important first step towards balancing the budget within the next 5 years. I'm pleased that this plan outlines a commitment to fiscal restraint and deficit reduction. Most importantly, it does not seek to raise taxes. We do not have any revenue problem in Washington. We have a spending problem, and I share the president's commitment to maintaining the line on spending, and I will continue to advocate for pro-growth economic policies that put more money back into the pockets of Southwest Louisiana families and small businesses. So, Congressman Bustani, let's do a real quick fact check, okay? First, you just sent us out a little mailer. Remember this? We all got it in the mail. Very proud of our tax dollars. You know, maybe one of the cuts you can make would be to stop sending us this inane stuff that gets thrown into the trash can that nobody is reading because we can't believe a darn thing you guys have to say. Well, anyway, we just find out that he's supporting the president's new budget. But in this letter, let's take a look. It says, this year, Congress will be considering legislation that will affect families and seniors in our communities. As your representative in Congress, I will always vote with your interests in mind. Well, that means he'll know that we don't want him to cut Medicare because that's our seniors that we're trying to protect. But anyhow, he's going to keep it in mind, but he's still going to vote to cut it. After all, he is supporting the president's huge cuts to Medicare. Unbelievable. And that's the only first program that we've known about so far. Also, it's just unbelievable. Also, we're talking about more money for Iraq. Again, some of it's being considered off budget, but this is what the huge explosion in spending is going towards. So, here's a clip from CNN as they take a look at the money and where it's going. Take a look.
Funding these two wars. We want to go straight to White House correspondent Elaine Quijano, who is standing by for the very latest on all of this. Elaine, what will the money be used for? Is there any breakdown of this figure?
Not yet, but what we can tell you, as you just reported, a senior administration official telling CNN that, in fact, when the president's budget comes out on Monday, as you noted, there will be a request there for an extra $100 billion in funding this year for Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as $145 billion for the year 2008. Now, certainly this coming at a time when there is a great deal of attention on the situation on the ground in Iraq. Today, of course, just a couple of hours ago, we learned about the declassified key judgments of the National Intelligence Estimate on Iraq, painting a very bleak picture of the situation on the ground there. In fact, the president's national security advisor, Stephen Hadley, just wrapped up a briefing on this on camera just a short time ago. Let's take a listen to some of what he had to say.
It shows, and the president clearly understands, that it is clearly a difficult challenging and complex situation on the ground in Iraq. This is not a simple problem. And we came to that is to say, the President came to the same conclusion, that unless efforts to reverse these conditions in Iraq show measurable progress in the coming 12 to 18 months, the overall security situation will deteriorate.
And Heidi, as we've been reporting all day today, what this national intelligence estimate, the declassified key judgment, illustrate is that in the opinion, the collective view of the intelligence community, the 16 intelligence agencies in the United States, that in fact they believe that the primary source of conflict in Iraq, not Al-Qaeda, but rather the sectarian violence and the sectarian divisions that continue to exist in Iraq. But it's interesting to note, Stephen Hadley was pressed on the question of whether or not the president would be ready now to call the situation in Iraq a civil war, because this estimate does talk about the term civil war accurately describing key elements of the Iraqi conflict. At the same time, Stephen Hadley pointing out that also in this estimate, Heidi, the intelligence community judges that the term civil war doesn't encompass the full picture because, for instance, they say there is Shia on Shia violence, and so the term civil war is still in question. Nevertheless, Stephen Hadley refusing to use that word civil war to describe what is taking place there, but certainly this coming at a time when the president is trying to convince skeptics, of course, on Capitol Hill that his plan for more U.S. troops in Iraq can work. Interesting to note, Heidi, that while the key judgments do talk about the consequences, possible consequences of rapidly withdrawing coalition forces, it does not talk about the possible consequences of adding U.S. forces. As you know, the president has in mind sending some 21,000 plus U.S. forces to pacify Baghdad and the Al-Anbar province. But certainly this will be continue to be examined here. This out now just a few hours. Heidi?
You know, Hadley still refuses in here to call this a civil war. Yet the NIE actually claims that it's worse than a civil war. Unbelievable. Make your own decisions. Paul Bremer is called to testify on Iraq. Paul Bremer, as you may know, was basically the king of Iraq for the first few months after our invasion over there, until we turned over sovereignty to the Iraqis. Wonder how that's going. Anyhow, during the time that he was in charge, billions, yes, billions with a B, of our tax dollars went missing. First, Bremer was asked about the accounting practices over there in Iraq. Here's what he had to say on Capitol Hill.
Again, the audit looks at the $8.8 billion dispersed to the ministries, and so just looking at that particular tranche of the DFI, it was our finding that the CPA should have done more to ensure transparency of how the ministries themselves executed their budgets.
Let me ask you this. It also, Regulation number 2 also says that the CPA shall obtain the services of an independent certified public accounting firm. Mr. Bowen, what would be the purpose of a certified independent public certified accounting firm? What would be the purpose of that?
Its mission was to serve as functionally the internal auditor to the comptroller of how the DFI was being managed and to promote transparency.
Now, Mr. Bowen, during your audit, did you determine whether the ambassador, in fact, hired such an accounting firm?
They did hire an accounting firm, but the accounting firm, as we identified in the audit, didn't meet the milestones that were expected of it.
So were the purpose fulfilled by that accounting firm?
No, they weren't.
Ambassador Bremer, why didn't you bring a certified public accounting firm on pursuant to your own regulation?
When I looked into this after I saw the Inspector General's report, it became clear that the CPA comptroller, who was in charge of this project, and again I think it was reported by the Special Inspector General, once the accounting firm was hired, changed the task of that accounting firm to help him produce a better track of accounting for DFI funds. The regulation, as you pointed out, calls for he should support the objective of ensuring the fund is administered and used in a transparent way.
What was the name of that firm, by the way, the firm you referred to? Just now.
That was hired?
Yes.
North Star, I understand.
Now, can you tell the committee what type of company North Star was, and can you tell the committee whether North Star had any accountants on its staff? Any?
I don't know what kind of firm it was other than it was an accounting firm. I've read the Special Inspector General's report that says that it had certified accountants on it.
And would you be concerned or upset if you found out that there were no accountants on North Star's staff? Would that concern you?
It would if it were true. I don't know. I don't know if it's true.
And can you tell us the value of that contract?
No, I don't know.
Well, let me tell you.
I'd be happy to
I can tell
it.
you it was $1.4 million. Let me show you this. I'd like to show you a picture of a house. Can you see that up there? According to press accounts, this house in San Diego is listed to North Star as North Star's official business address. Did you know this company was run out of somebody's house? This company that got the $1.4 million?
No, I didn't know until I read about it in, I think, the hearings that were held here in June of 2005.
Right.
So, let me get this right. The accounting firm that he hires has no CPAs working for it, and to boot, a multi-million-dollar contract is given to them, and it's being run out of the basement of someone's home. Unbelievable. I think there's probably a few other firms that might have enjoyed that contract. Oh, I can probably think of over 100 right here in Lafayette that would have done that are good firms that actually have great CPAs working for them. But no, they wanted to go ahead and pay back some of their loyalists. Mind you, none of that money is coming here, folks. None of it. Then Bremer's asked about their hiring practices. In a flashback to, "You're doing a heck of a job, Brownie," we get to find out about all the different people that they were hiring there over in Iraq to supposedly do the diplomatic hard work that needed to be done. Many of these people were political hires. In fact, most of them were actually political hires with no experience whatsoever. Most of them college kids who in turn got to play football with bricks of our taxpayer money. Unbelievable. Take a look at the hearing where they talk about the hires over there.
Secondly, I did not do the hiring of those people in that article. I don't think I even ever met any of those people. My role in hiring was very limited because of the amount of time I had to get ready to leave, which was very short. I hired my personal staff, a couple of senior deputies to me, and a couple of senior advisors. The hiring to answer...
Interrupting you,
sure.
But I'd like to, do you know who did hire these people?
Yes, I was coming to that.
Okay.
You asked where the hiring was done in an office in the Pentagon, and I think if the committee has questions about those procedures, that's the appropriate place to ask those questions.
Do you know specifically which office and who was responsible
Well,
for that?
the name of the man I think was in charge of the office, I'm not sure what his title was a man named O'Byrne. I don't know what his title was. I have to say, Congressman, that I know this article made the allegation these people were rewarded for their political loyalty or something. It has never been entirely clear to me what kind of a reward it is to send somebody to Baghdad, but perhaps somebody can enlighten me on that.
Well, I think the article also
wasn't
said
obvious to the rest of us.
Well, I think some of the article mentioned that they were paid up to or more than $100,000, which by most accounts for somebody just out of school is not a bad reward. But you also had an interview with Frontline in which you stated, "I might see a biography, or one of my staff might, and would say yes or no. But we really didn't have, frankly, very much time to vet all the people coming there." You said you never looked at these particular people. Did any of your staff have responsibility for looking at these people in the budget office?
The hiring was done in Washington by the Pentagon.
And you had nobody on your staff had a chance to look it over and
not in Baghdad. Not that to my memory, I don't think anybody in Baghdad had time to look at those resumes, sir.
So you mentioned the two goals that you had, primary goals. One, of course, was security, and the other one was the reconstruction and the putting the Iraqi people back to work in their economy. So in planning this whole situation, what I think you're telling me is that the Department of Defense would foist upon you individuals whom they had apparently hired and then put them in a position of this kind of extreme importance without your having any control over them?
I've attached to my statement today the list of the top 100 or so people in the CPA.
But these are apparently people that you thought were vitally important. The idea of spending this money for reconstruction and economic improvement there would be, by your own admission, the second highest priority you had set. So my question really was, once these people put in place, you say without your imprimatur at all, did you then have the ability to exercise any control or assignment responsibilities for them?
Well, not the low-level people who are the subject of that particular article. What I was trying to say is that if you look at the attachment to my statement, where I have listed the qualifications of the top 100 or so people, they would be the people that I would normally interact with more than others, you will find a very competent, experienced group of people from many different countries who were, in my view, competent. I don't exclude the possibility that among the 3,000 people who worked for the CPA, there were people who were not competent.
Thank you, Mr. Tierney. I want to inform you and the committee members of our efforts to try to get information. When these allegations of cronyism appeared in the paper, we contacted last September the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, and asked for a briefing by James O'Byrne, the political appointee at the Pentagon alleged to have screened the applicants. And we got no response to that. Then when the election took place in January, Mr. Davis and I joined together in a request for a briefing and a meeting with Mr. O'Byrne. And we were told, well, the reason they didn't answer our first request is that they have a policy of not giving information to those who are in the minority in Congress. We informed them that we're now in the majority and this is a bipartisan request, and they indicated to us that they didn't know about it, they hadn't seen it, even though we mailed it, we faxed it, we emailed that request to them. It just seems to me this is quite frankly an example of stonewalling on their part, and I would hope that we get the cooperation of the Department of Defense to at least let us ask questions, not in a hearing, but at a briefing from the person who was allegedly the one responsible for giving a litmus test and hiring political cronies rather than the very best people for the CPA.
Well, finally, we're getting to the bottom of things there, and scarily, we're looking at this and realizing that it might just be a false bottom, not in fact the true. Bush caught in another distortion. Well, here we go again, folks. This past week, Keith Olbermann looks into news reports from the CBO that while the president has stated that he has committed more than 20,000 additional troops into Iraq, it could mean as many as 48,000 troops. Take a look at this report.
New math. The president's escalation, 21,500 more troops to Iraq, actually means 35,000 more troops to Iraq, maybe as many as 48,000 more troops to Iraq. The Congressional Budget Office reports 21,500 more combat troops means thousands more support troops going there as well. I guess Mr. Bush just forgot to mention that. Well, he did say,
I've committed more than 20,000 additional American troops to Iraq.
Emphasis on more than. Good evening.
You know, one thing is absolutely and totally crystal clear to me and millions of other Americans right now. Bush can no longer be trusted whatsoever. He knows how unpopular this surge is, and yet he's still pushing on. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. You know what? Not only are the military commanders saying that this isn't going to work, but also the Iraqis are now saying that it's not going to work. Congress is saying it's not going to work. The American people are saying it's not going to work. Get our kids home. And still, Bush ignores us. And still, he's on his little vendetta. While Jon Stewart takes a look at the discourse in Washington as well, take a look at his summation of clips of Tony Snow, who is, the head salesman for Bush Inc. Take a look.
As a matter of fact, as we speak, there are debates on Capitol Hill over a variety of non-binding resolutions declaring our president's surge plan not in the nation's best interest. But these debates do have their downside.
All of these options that are being talked about on the Hill will embolden terrorists in every part of the world.
To question the president's plan to pass this resolution emboldens the terrorists. And by the way, don't get any other cockamamie ideas about taking our troops out of there.
The withdrawal from Iraq would embolden the terrorists.
Retreat from Iraq before the job is done would embolden the enemy.
No resolutions, no withdrawals, no retreat. Now, some might say, all right. But could you give us maybe a sense of around when we might start beginning the thought of pulling everyone out?
All timetables do is embolden the enemy.
Damn it! Can't even have a timetable. We're so close. Can't do that. We can't do that. We can't have a timetable. All right. It's so confusing to me. I mean, I know that we need to fight terrorism. I know that. But I don't always agree with the way we're doing it. My feelings are mixed.
You can embolden an enemy by sending mixed message.
Oh, I'm so stupid. I mixed my messages. I keep emboldening. My only comfort is the emboldening that we're doing is limited to the American people and Congress. That's it, right?
It's not the American people in the United States Congress that are emboldening the enemy. It's the failed policy of this president.
There's nothing that won't embolden these people. They're so emboldenable.
To question the president emboldens our enemies. It emboldens the terrorists. Unbelievable. You know what? This is America, and I don't think that we have to turn over all of our rights and our sovereign dignity to terrorists and not question our president, our commander-in-chief, when he's not doing a good job. After all, these are the same types of issues that were going on back when our founding fathers founded this country. It is every American's duty to stand up and question our leaders and to make sure that they're doing the right thing. It's unbelievable that they would try and still pull this after the midterm elections. You know, of course, we should not forget Bush is giving some of the same signals he gave over 4 years ago on Iraq, but this time on Iran.
Some are trying to take my words and say, well, what he's really trying to do is go invade Iran. Nobody's talking about that.
In fact, some people are talking like that, specifically the very same conservative think tanks which pushed for the Iraq war as part of an aggressive U.S. policy of regional transformation throughout the Middle East. So if Mr. Bush's words fail to convince, it may be because he used similar language, very similar language, in 2002, at a time when critics suspected he had already decided to invade Iraq. Consider the similarities between the phrases Mr. Bush uses now about Iran and the ones he used in 2002 about Iraq.
The Iraqi people cannot flourish under a dictator that oppresses them, threatens them. Our struggle is not with the Iranian people. As a matter of fact, we want them to flourish. Iraq is a land rich in culture, and resources, and talent. And the Iranian people are proud people, and they've got a great history and a great tradition. If we fail to act in the face of danger, the people of Iraq will continue to live in brutal submission. The regime will remain unstable. The region will remain unstable with little hope of freedom, and isolated from the progress of our times. And one of the things that the Iranian government has done is they've begun to isolate their nation to the harm of the Iranian people. Hopefully this can be done peacefully. I believe we can solve our problems peacefully. All options are on the table. All options are on the table.
But it is not mere rhetoric that echoes down to us from 2002. Strategically, diplomatically, Mr. Bush is pursuing the same course now that he did then. Disengage from discussion, marshal international condemnation, convince the world that the enemy in question aids and abets anti-American terrorism now, and that it poses a grave potential threat in the future. In 2003, when Mr. Bush still exhibited thorough optimism about Iraq, he spoke quite openly about what would come next.
We support the advance of freedom in the Middle East because it is our founding principle and because it is in our national interest. The Middle East presents many obstacles to the advance of freedom, and I understand that this transformation will be difficult. The way forward in the Middle East is not a mystery. It is a matter of will and vision and action.
But the logic has since become inverted. Back then, American success in Iraq was supposed to lead to success in Iran. Now we are told that we must succeed with Iran to ensure our success in Iraq. But even standing on its figurative head, the administration's conclusion remains inviolate. Something must be done about Iran.
You know, it's high time that we unite together and stop this man. It's really growing to be uncontrollable. Next week, we're going to get a new look at PDA, Progressive Democrats of America. They've actually put together a small video we're going to include in the next week's show. They are urging the support of members of Congress to sign on to an out-of-Iraq program. So anyhow, next week we'll bring that to you. We're actually going to run out of time this week with everything else we have. If you'd like more information, though, on PDA before next week, you can visit their website at pdamerica.org. Always mess that one up.